Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Play, Pause, Rewind, our podcast where we talk about movies and TV shows that we have been watching. Niles, how have you been the last couple weeks?
I've been good. Staying busy as always. There's always a lot to do, but I'm excited that the cold weather has arrived so quickly in Colorado.
Yeah.
I do love the winter. We got to the movies a few times. Going to see Wakanda Forever, which is what we're talking about today. Back at you, Dylan. How have you been?
Pretty good. Just same old usual stuff, but Friday had two Friendsgiving dinners, one at work, one with our friend group, and I will tell you, yesterday I wanted to die. I felt horrible all day.
All that Thanksgiving food, man.
Yeah, and this is coming out Thanksgiving week, the day before, so happy Thanksgiving to anyone who's listening and watching before then. Hope you spend some wonderful time with your families and friends. And pro tip for next year, spread your Friendsgivings out. Don't do what I did, because you will not be happy the next morning. But yes, as you said, we are talking about Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. And as always, we will do non-spoilers for a couple minutes, and then we'll do spoilers after that. So if you haven't seen it, definitely peace out around that time. But let's just get started. So it's obviously the sequel to Black Panther, in the way that any Marvel sequel is a sequel to the first film. It's the next Marvel film, really. But this film picks up with the death of T'Challa. If you didn't know, in real life, sadly, Chadwick Boseman passed away. Wakanda is sort of at odds with the rest of the world, with the United Nations, in the wake of the loss of the Black Panther and a bunch of other stuff going on. And the film really centers around our side characters from the first movie dealing with their grief and loss at the loss of their king, Black Panther, and family member. Stars Letitia Wright, Dominique Thorne, Angela Bassett, Tenoch Huerta, Danae Guerrera, Lupita Nyong'o, Winston Duke, Martin Freeman, and a lot more people. Directed by Ryan Coogler, once again, and written by Ryan Coogler and Joe Robert Cole. What were your overall thoughts on Black Panther, Wakanda Forever?
Overall, I think I'm very pleased with this film. I think it's very rare that Marvel misses the mark on a lot of their work. There's definitely exceptions with that. Like, I think, Thor and Love and Thunder is kind of an example of that, where we had high expectations and it kind of fell far below those. And I think, as time passes, when the movie first comes out, like, it always just kind of has this cycle of, like, everyone just loves it and they just, like, go crazy about it. And there's just a huge discourse about it. And then it kind of drops off the radar. And then once you revisit those films and kind of have some time to reflect, you realize, there are some things that weren't quite right. And I think that's kind of happened with some of those Marvel projects that we've seen before, like specifically with Thor: Love and Thunder. Like, I don't mean to crap on that film right to begin with, but, like, as the more time passes after watching that movie, the more I'm like, I wish, it was a different film. But, like, with this one, with Wakanda Forever, I feel very pleased with it overall. And I feel like I'm going to maintain that opinion as time goes on. Like, there's, like, it's not a perfect film, and it's really difficult to follow up the groundbreaking success and just the nature of Black Panther, the original film, because I was just so, like, just monumental for just even, like, filmmaking industry, but like Black culture. It was just such a riveting film, and especially with that lead actor with Chadwick, he just brought such gravity to the role. And even though he's not in this, I think a lot of the characters and the actors, they really stepped up to the plate and delivered for the most part. And I think the narrative was actually very thought-provoking as well.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, you and I are pretty positive on, I would say, most all of the MCU stuff, and and the criticism Marvel films most accurately get, I would say, especially lately, is the lack of creativity in the directing and poor visual composition and bad VFX as a result of the VFX being rushed. This film has none of those problems, which is nice to see. Like, it is a very nice film to look at. The set design is great. The shots are good. There's lots of color, and the VFX were clearly given the time they needed to look good. Like, even Namor's little, like, feathery foot wings don't look stupid. Like, they're kind of cool.
Yeah, I was a little worried about that when I first saw that trailer. I was like, oh, that looks weird.
Yeah, but it works. It worked out. I agree. I like this movie a lot. And you do feel the loss of Chadwick Boseman in it, but the way the story is told, it takes what would have been like an Achilles heel in a worse writer and makes that the central theme of the story. So the entire movie is about feeling the loss of Chadwick Boseman. So it aligns us, the audience, with the characters in a very effective way. I think my problem with this movie, and again, I'm very positive on it, but I do think it is overcrowded and it is stuffed with subplots and characters that probably don't need to be here. I have said this to you off air, and I've seen it said by other people, that it is a little bit of an Iron Man 2 situation. And if you don't know what that means, or it's been a long time since you've seen Iron Man 2, like, and I didn't know this at the time about these characters. I didn't know who they were, so I just thought they were new characters. But, like, Black Widow's in that movie. Nick Fury's in that movie.
Yeah.
Like, and it felt to comic book fans and people who knew these characters that, oh, this is introducing S.H.I.E.L.D. and introducing Avengers characters because we're building up to the Avengers. And I got that sense here, and I'll elaborate on that more in spoilers because it involves characters who appear and stuff like that. But the performances were great, and it really put a lot on the shoulders of actors who were cast as side characters in the first movie, and now they are thrust into the spotlight because they need to be, because of what happened in real life. So
and I feel like this movie does feel like a love letter to Chadwick Boseman and his performances to T'Challa. You know, like the entire, you know, if you've been on social media and you've been following like anything about this movie, then you'll know that the opening sequence, you know, like the classic Marvel kind of intro where it has all the flashes of the characters on screen, it's just dead silent. There's no music, and it's just all
it's just him. Yeah,
it's just Chadwick, and it's just beautiful. And then they spend so much time in this film, like, you know, having these characters grapple with his off-screen death at the start of the film, and like how they're kind of coping with their loss. But it spends a lot of time just kind of like letting these characters grow and breathe, but also giving them some time to reflect on this loss. And it just feels very like pivotal in this film. And, you know, one thing that I'll also say about this film too is that I really appreciated how it carried a very similar messaging, some very similar themes from the original one. You know, like I feel like with some of these Marvel films, you know, kind of going back to Thor again, you know, the first two Thor movies, very different than the last two Thor movies, you know, like the tone is very different. And, you know, that is because they realized that Chris Hemsworth is a very comedic actor, and they just kind of wanted to embrace that and kind of give him a different tone. And it's not a, you know, a bad thing about those movies, but, you know, it is just kind of like some of these movies don't always have that consistency. Between, like, you know, the first one, even the first Iron Man to the second one, you know, they're kind of different films, and the themes aren't always like fully aligned. But this one, you know, 1,000 feet up, you know, super high level. The original Black Panther is really focusing heavily on isolationism, race identity, socioeconomic disparities, oppression, and you know what it is to be black in America and Africa. You know, these very complex kind of issues are very prevalent in that movie. And Wakanda Forever returns to some of these themes. It has its own story. It has its own messaging and, you know, own themes that it really wants to, like, deal with, like grief that we already discussed. But, you know, it's it talks about oppression and isolationism again, but then also has this addition of anti-colonialist messaging too. And there's a lot more, you know, it's very distinct, but I appreciated how it's just very much, or it felt more continuous, if that makes sense.
And Wakanda as a country is sort of it's a fictional nation, obviously, but it represents the potential that an African country could have if it weren't like fucking plundered by centuries of colonialism and the slave trade. And in the first movie, Killmonger is he experienced being black in America, and America is a deeply racist and prejudiced country, still dealing with the legacy of slavery to today. And that fuels a lot of his resentment for the people who are in Wakanda who did not help anyone, like any black people outside of the country, and it fuels his anger for the rest of the world because he's seen the ugly and true face of whiteness and colonialism.
Yes.
And this movie really dives into the colonialism angle and shows how it's still happening today. And we'll talk about that more in spoilers as well. But and it also, like, to a degree, plays with the idea that a lot of times different minorities are pitted against each other to prevent them from forming solidarity against the oppressive forces of neoliberal Western powers like America and Europe. So that's part of this as well. Let's see.
Yeah, and I like that this movie, we've talked about it before with some of these past Marvel projects that they've been putting out for Phase 4, and I appreciate that they're diverging from, what we've come to expect in the MCU. Like, they're getting a little bit more experimental, like we've talked about before with, like, Werewolf by Night. Love that. Give me more of that kind of experimental, weird stuff. Like, that's fun. And this movie embraces some of that stuff. It's kind of ambitious, a little bit too much at some points, but it does try to deviate from what we are typically expecting. It gives us something that's feels a little bit more authentic and original, but it still is entrenched in those typical formulaic qualities that we've come to expect from superhero films. Like the climactic battle between the protagonist and antagonist, like all these other kinds of things going on, and the superpowers, all these things. So you can't really break away from that when it's a superhero film. So yeah.
Yeah. It does feel like it has more directorial vision than a lot of Marvel projects do, which is good, and I hope we see that more in the future, because that is a problem with Marvel, is that a lot of them are pretty homogenized. But yeah, it is still at the end, and it does touch on colonialism and the CIA being what the CIA is, but it also is still a Disney product, so it doesn't go the full 9 yards, as maybe it should. But it still is more explicit and accusatory than I expected Disney to approve, which is kind of wild. But it's gonna be one of those episodes again where we'll talk about how bad America is and how terrible the CIA is again. Yeah. And if you disagree with us, just do a little bit of research, because it's all public record, baby.
Yeah, it seriously is. Yeah, and I think for the most part, there's a lot, we'll talk about it, in spoilers. There's a lot of action in this movie too. Not a ton of it, which is nice. But I think most of the action, like we said already, the VFX looks good. They took their time on this. It didn't look rushed. I think the climactic battle, there's some kind of parts of it that I think could have been better. And I think there's a lot of slow-mo in this film too. It kind of felt like I was watching 300 again at some point. So Jesus Christ, can we hurry this up? It doesn't need to linger this long on this one slow-motion shot, but small thing.
I will say too, because I mentioned that it's a little unfocused and has a lot going on in an Iron Man 2 sort of way, but I didn't feel that hurt the pacing so much. I didn't have a problem with the pacing of this movie, even though it is very long. I just felt that those extra parts that we'll talk about in spoilers didn't fit as cleanly into the themes of the movie as the rest of it, and that was my problem with them more than causing pacing issues. But I would recommend this before we get into spoilers. What about you?
Yeah, I'd recommend it as well. Like I said, I think it's a good Marvel movie, and it deviates enough for it to be interesting and feel original. It doesn't feel overly formulaic. Performances are strong. There's just small little things that I think could have been better or could have been improved upon. But this movie is like, what, 2.5 hours or something like that?
Yeah, it's like 2 hours, 40 minutes or something.
Yeah, and there's points where I'm like, I wish I had more of that, and I wish I had less of this. And it's like, it's at the end of the day, I don't want to watch a 3-hour Marvel film unless it's like an Avengers movie that's like super climactic, like Endgame or Infinity War.
The end of an era, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But like, so it's like kind of a tough decision. Do you add more? Do you take out more? What do you leave in? What do you like change about it? But
definitely a case by case basis. But yeah, let's do spoilers now. I think it's about time. Yeah. So I think the best place to start would be the loss of Chadwick Boseman, because that is a shadow that looms over this entire film. And as we know, Chadwick Boseman tragically passed away in 2020 after secretly battling cancer for a very long time. From what I understand, he had beat it previously, earlier in his life, and he seemed very confident that he was going to do so again. Ryan Coogler even talked about the last time he spoke with Chadwick. He had sent the script over, and he said it sounded like he was lying down or something, but he was like, oh yeah, I'll get to it soon and give it a read. So it was very abrupt and sudden for even the people close to him outside of his family, because he just didn't tell them. And the first, obviously, like, if you remember, the first Black Panther movie and T'Challa himself were hugely important culturally to the Black culture. And I'm going to speak on this as an outsider, obviously, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But, like, people were buying out whole theaters so little kids could go see it, and it seemed like it was really important and impactful for Black kids to see themselves portrayed on screen in that positive of a way. It's like, not only is he a good guy, he's a fucking king. And that mattered a lot. So his absence in the second film obviously hits very hard.
Well, yeah, I just think it was so impactful because, we have had Black superheroes before, but, I don't think they've necessarily been as notable or impactful as this. Like, we had Blade back in the day, but that's not exactly made for kids.
Right.
It's vampire stuff, and like I think we've had other Black superheroes too, and I think they've always been kind of like more side characters rather than the main characters.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that's like a big aspect of why the original Black Panther was so impactful. It was like the first Black superhero who's the protagonist.
Yeah.
And also he's part of this like Black society that's like super advanced and
the most powerful nation in the world, basically. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and it's like it is empowering. It's empowering for so many people in the world who haven't had that kind of representation or seen that kind of story before. So it was such a significant cultural event at the time, and I think it's still, like so many people, I think still just that film resonates with them.
Yeah.
And Chadwick Boseman was such an integral part of that. He gave such a profound interpretation of the character of T'Challa, and it's just like I just can't envision anyone else playing that role, because he just embodied it so well, and he just brought such grace to it and just such love and compassion for everyone.
And he seemed to understand the importance of what he was doing, which it like I understand in the broader context around superhero movies and us being adults. It feels silly to talk about the importance of playing a superhero, but it was fucking important. It mattered. And if you're someone who is dismissive of that, I'm just willing to bet that it wasn't about you. Like, if you think it wasn't important to you, but it was important to people. And that's, I think, critical to recognize. But you mentioned you can't see anyone else portraying him, and that dovetails into the next part of this that I want to talk about is the recast T'Challa movement. So Marvel announced somewhat quickly that they had no intention of recasting T'Challa and did not specify on any sort of timeline. So initially there was a petition made by, I believe, E-Man Reviews was the creator, and from what he has said, he took his time and was very careful and considerate about all the different people who might be affected by this, and his argument was like, this character is important, and I would like to see him return at some point in time, because Marvel basically was saying they'll never recast T'Challa. And I think we know capitalism, and we know IP, and we know that they will recast T'Challa at some point in some capacity. But the movement got hijacked by the Manosphere fools, who basically turned it into an anti-woman, specifically anti-black woman thing, and made it super sexist. And like a lot of initially well-intentioned things on the internet, it was completely ruined by these people. But I did want to ask, divorced from all of that, how do you feel about T'Challa at some point in the future being recast or returning in some capacity? Because I have complicated feelings about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of complicated on it too, because when someone gives such a powerful performance like Chadwick did in the multiple Marvel movies that he appeared in, it is difficult to imagine someone else in that role. It's kind of like, not to say that I have a super like emotional attachment with this character of like, but as an example, just like, Superman, for example, like right now, because I grew up with kind of Henry Cavill playing that role in Man of Steel and everything, like I can't really imagine someone else playing that. But because it's been handed down so many times between actors, it feels a little bit more acceptable for me. If it's just like, oh yeah, if someone else wants to be Superman, that's fine. But with T'Challa, since this is like the original role, this is the original actor playing this role, like it's it's just really difficult for me to envision anyone else doing this. And I mean, given enough time, I think it's okay if they want to change that. And we don't have to talk about it too much, but I think they did kind of put in a workaround in this film of like how they could recast him down the line and reintroduce a similar type character.
Yes, they did.
It is kind of a complicated thing, because like I don't want someone to play this role besides Chadwick, just because he was. It's just difficult for me to separate that character.
Yeah, and like I said, I have complicated feelings on it as well. On the one hand, I understand the desire to see T'Challa again. That very positive and healthy portrayal of black masculinity. I understand the desire for that. And I get why people would want to see him again, too, because his arc wasn't done. But my personal take, and again, my perspective is not the important one here necessarily, but would I be opposed to seeing a version of T'Challa in some story down the line? No, of course not. But in this continuity that we're all invested in, I am opposed to recasting and returning characters who have died across the board. And I get T'Challa is a little bit different because his exit was not motivated by a storytelling reason. It was a real life thing that affected the story in unintended ways, and his arc wasn't concluded. But like, as soon as Iron Man comes back, I'm fucking done. I'm out. I'm not interested in that. Same with Captain America, and now same with T'Challa. Like, because the story of Wakanda Forever is built around the absence of this character now, and we've had a lot of character growth as a result of his loss for other characters. And I think part of storytelling on this scale, like when you have a long-running narrative that's interwoven across these many things, you have to roll with the punches of real life. And it sucks that he died. It's very sad. But he did. They killed the character off in the movie, and they used that to motivate a new character. And I think we should stick with the consequences of that. That being said, it's Disney, it's Marvel. They're going to recast him at some fucking point because it will drive ticket sales and make their shareholder value go up. So, it's a tough conversation, but I think it's I like permanence in my stories. I like consequences to have lasting impacts, and
me too.
I don't think you should bring back characters that you've killed off. If they wanted to have T'Challa back around, you could have put him in a coma or something, but that wouldn't have been as motivating for the story.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, Disney and Marvel, they got the workaround of the multiverse, because they're introducing that and everything this phase. So I mean, if they ever wanted to reintroduce T'Challa, they have an option to do that with the multiverse. So at least they have that kind of built into the story moving forward. But
right.
At the same time, it's okay if 3 different Spider-Men show up from different eras in a movie and from the multiverse. That's fun and that's cool and I'm into that. But I don't want just a character from a different universe to come in and start playing T'Challa. I think that would just come off in poor taste and not be very well received. And I think most of the people that are fans of this series of Wakanda and Black Panther in general will be no, don't recast him. I think that's pretty correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's pretty much the colloquial understanding across the fan base. For the
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how the numbers break down, but there is still a lot of loss and grief around his passing in the real world, both from people who knew him personally and the larger population. But I will say one element that doesn't totally work about this movie and about the decision to not recast T'Challa is this script was written before Chadwick Boseman died, and T'Challa was the protagonist. So the conflict with Namor was going to be the thrust of the movie, and they had to rework the script, obviously, as a result of what happened. But I think part of the result of that is there are scenes that I think were originally envisioned to be with T'Challa, and they had to rework them to include other characters, and that doesn't always work. I think there are some Shuri scenes with Namor, especially, that were initially T'Challa scenes, and they don't totally work with where she is emotionally in this story, in my opinion.
When they're kind of underwater and they're talking about the ideological differences and everything between their civilizations. It's that feels like
a T'Challa scene, right?
That feels like him doing the whole thing up in what was it? I think that was a Civil War where he was talking to
Zemo.
Zemo outside in the cold, and he's vengeance has consumed you, and it's that he has this interesting kind of conversation with him. It felt kind of that conversation.
And apparently fans of T'Challa from the comics actually have a problem with that scene because they're comic book T'Challa would have just killed this guy.
Okay, whatever.
But
there's no pleasing Marvel fans. There just is no pleasing them.
No, but I think Coogler and his team made a really smart decision when reworking the script into making it about grief and about the loss of T'Challa, and that's the motivating factor for the majority of our main characters.
Yes.
And the grieving process is a really central part of the story, which leads us into grief and how the movie explores it, I think.
It is one of the most central themes of this movie, and I appreciate, we kind of said it before with other Phase 4 movies, my prediction, this whole phase has just been kind of ever since WandaVision, it's this is just dealing with consequences. This is just grappling with loss. And, I think that's been pretty consistent throughout these movies and series that have been released for Phase 4. And this one definitely embodies that idea of grief and loss and how, people work through the loss of a loved one in different ways. Some people, it might take them a very short amount of time. Some people, it's going to affect them for the rest of their lives. And, it's going to be something that you really need to process and talk through and think through as well. And you need that kind of support system too. But, grief affects everyone differently. And I think that really came across well in this movie too. We have the Queen Ramonda. She fires Okoye after the mission goes south and she gets captured. And, I think you and I kind of shared a similar kind of why did she do that? That seems very unreasonable after Okoye has been so central to your governance here. And I think that was partly because of her grief, and
yes,
also because she didn't want to lose another child,
right,
after having lost one already so recently.
which is what I like about the way this movie explores grief. It's because it takes it a step further, and it shows how dealing with grief and being in a mourning period directly affects your actions and decision making process. Because I think we agree firing Okoye is a bad move. That wasn't smart of her to do that. Sure, Okoye, I guess, fucked up in some sense, but it's not like they were outmatched and it was out of her control. And she's a good resource in the government and has been a loyal general for a long time, except for that one time. But but she was still but even then she was still following the laws of her country. It just happened to not align with T'Challa and the squad. But but I think you're right. She fears the loss of Shuri because she's still emotionally dealing with the loss of T'Challa and is consumed by grief. But then we also see Shuri dealing with her grief in a different way, which is to not deal with it and bottling it up. And I think that causes her to act out of anger quite a lot, endangering her entire country and pulling them to the precipice of an unending war with this other advanced nation. And it leads to her surprise encounter in the ancestral plane when she drinks the heart-shaped herb and becomes Black Panther, seeing someone she probably didn't really want to see or expect to see, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But she's very angry, and it makes her make bad decisions because she's unwilling to confront the loss of her brother and deal with it. And I think that comes from her being just young, too.
Yeah. Well, and I think the movie, after the movie opens up with Chadwick's death, it happens off screen, and then I think it's a year passes after the funeral or something like that. So even though she has had this time to reflect on it, and the Queen has processed it a little bit better than Shuri has, it's just it does kind of speak to that of it takes time.
Yeah.
People get over loss in their own ways, and it just takes time. And some people are resistant to it, like Shuri was, and some people are accepting of it and embrace it. And it takes time. And we also see how grief affects other people throughout the country too, and our side characters, what's her name?
Nakia.
Thank you. Thank you. She, just completely left Wakanda again to go off and help other people because she just didn't really know how to deal with the grief at home in Wakanda. She kind of needed to get out and get back to what she does best, which is helping others.
Well, and there's additional reasoning for her absence as well, which we'll talk about in the post credits. But I wanted to jump in on something you said, the opening scene with T'Challa's off-screen death. How did you feel about that scene itself?
I'm conflicted on it because I think it was kind of silly at points.
Moving the DNA balls around.
Yeah, moving DNA balls around. I can just kind of picture that actress on set just kind of on the green screen just being what am I doing here? I'm just standing here waiting for this thing to finish doing this thing so I can rush it over to my brother. It's
it's the same shit Iron Man does, but it is kind of goofy when contrasted with the very serious and somber nature of what's going on. But
it is a little
it's
weird.
just Marvel technology, I guess.
Yeah, I think I would have appreciated it more if it was they're just rushing through the hallways or something like that, and then they get to the door and Angela Bassett's character walks out and it's he's passed, and I think that would have been fine too. But I think the fact that it was off screen and we don't get to know what he died of, we just know it's some unknown illness or something. I think that's it's acceptable to me, and I think it sets a nice tone for the movie too. That's the first thing that happens is his death. And then everything just goes from there. Yeah,
I'm a little bit different on it. I don't like that scene. I think the movie should have started after he had died. Then I think part of me thinks the reason they included it was to future-proof the movie for future audience viewers. Because we know why Chadwick Boseman's not in this movie. He died in real life. But like someone who's a little kid now and is watching this in 12, 15 years or something, they're not going to know that necessarily. So this is an in-universe like explanation for why T'Challa's not here. I think the movie would have had a stronger opening, maybe even just with a text screen, and then we start with the funeral stuff. Because I think the funeral sequence is beautiful and really well done. But one element I do like about it is it's a direct consequence of the events of the first film. Like, Killmonger burned all the heart-shaped herbs. We are shown very quickly that if she can figure out this heart-shaped herb, she can save him, but they don't have any more, and she can't do it, and it does come back later in the movie when she is able to synthesize it. So I guess it plays with Shuri's character arc a little bit, but I think the scene is kind of weird.
It's a little goofy.
It felt off, and the goofiness felt off-putting and made me a little bit uncomfortable due to the real-life nature of his death. So I didn't love that, but overall, I appreciate the movie's approach to grief because it's not like you don't grieve in isolation. Like, it seeps into every aspect of your life and affects the way you do things and make decisions. And I think it was a realistic portrayal of how that can affect the rest of your actions.
I agree there for sure.
Yeah. But let's talk about the antagonists a little bit and how Coogler is able to really develop them and not just make them like bad guys.
He does a very good job with this, especially in the first Black Panther. Killmonger was absolutely a sympathetic antagonist, and I'll absolutely take that kind of a character who we can understand their reasoning very well and relate to it, and kind of root for them in a way.
Yeah.
I'll take this kind of
because he's right.
Because he's right, and there's a lot of merit to his argument. It's not just some evil guy who's taking over because he's evil. He's just like, I want unlimited power, and it's like, okay, whatever, dude. But just like this kind of character, like Killmonger, Namor is a very interesting and sympathetic antagonist as well. It is tough to top a villain like Thanos, of course, where we got to really know him and understand his motivations and his argument as well. But we get plenty of time spent on Namor in this movie as well. They're definitely top or closer to the top of the spectrum of like antagonists in the MCU. And I think he just is so interesting, and he did it, and the performance was great by the actor. I loved it, and I liked a lot of the things about his character too.
And I think both Killmonger and Namor exist in an interesting contrast to Thanos, because Thanos, we spend a lot of time in his head in Infinity War, but if you really like examine his ideology and what he's trying to do, like, it's completely ridiculous.
Yes.
But Killmonger and Namor have like comprehensive ideologies, and they have accurate readings of the states of the world that they exist in. And Killmonger, I can understand the argument where that villain's weakness is that they do the Marvel thing where it's like, oh, he's right, let's have him kill a bunch of people to make us not like them as much. But yeah, and Namor, like, he does an act of war on Wakanda, and that results in the death of the Queen. But I'm not ever rooting against him in the same way, like, because they don't have him act out of malice necessarily at any point. They don't fall into that trap.
It's always in defense of his people and like protecting his civilization and their own resources too. Because his whole thing is, he understands that the surface civilizations, the ones up above, once they understand that they have this technology down there, and that there's this whole population down there as well, they're gonna do exactly what they did back in what was that? The 14 or 1500s, right?
The whole time.
Just the whole fucking time that European civilization.
But the scramble for Africa was part of it, where European imperial powers just like all raced each other to take over as much of Africa as possible and extract as many natural resources as possible. And this was part of mercantilism, which was the prominent economic system at the time. If you don't know what that is, it was basically the idea that there is a finite amount of resources here on the planet, so we need to make sure our country has the most of those resources. So we're going to steal it from everywhere else. Bad stuff.
Bad.
Yeah, it was mercantilism was the precursor to capitalism. So they fed into each other. Yeah. But we have a whole section on colonialism and all that later on. But one quick note before we dive into the next thing, I just want to say Angela Bassett fucking killed it as Queen Ramonda. She had some of the best monologues in the movie, and no wonder the marketing was like based around her delivery.
Yes,
because it was awesome.
She was fantastic. Yeah, I loved her performance, and I always have loved her in the original one too.
It's a much more minor role in that, but she's very important in this movie, I would say. But
the queen of an empire.
Yeah. But I do want to talk about the Iron Man 2 effect. And does this movie have too much going on? Yes. I would say it does. What would you say?
Yeah, I would definitely agree too. There's a lot of, like we said, there's a lot of characters in this movie. You have, Shuri. You have Namor. You have the Queen. You have
Nakia, Okoye, M'Baku.
Yeah, Okoye. You have so many, and then you have the Ironheart character in this as well, and then you have the CIA subplot with Martin Freeman's character, and it's like there's just so much going on that it's kind of like too much at times, and it does feel like they're kind of setting up things, including these like story elements to like provide some context for the future Ironheart series or Thunderbolts, and it's like I don't think you always need that in these movies. Like, yeah, it's nice to continue to build up the universe and set up things for the future. At the same time, you can just focus on the characters of this story first before you get too far ahead of yourselves. Like, I think a lot of it I loved and I enjoyed. But yeah, there's a lot shoved in here. Like, I think the CIA subplot is one that definitely comes to mind. It doesn't take up a lot of screen time, to be honest. Like, I think it's probably 10 minutes of the film, if that. But, it's like it kind of felt gratuitous and unnecessary. And, like, Martin Freeman's character, he just kind of, like, doing a lot of exposition and on his phone and, like, talking with Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character. So, it's like they're just kind of giving... They're rounding out her character a little bit more, but it's also kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if that subplot was necessarily entirely needed. I guess.
Right, and we focus on these two subplots because of the relation to the themes of the movie. Like all of the Wakandan characters and the Talokan characters, like they needed to be there. They're part of the story. It's about this impending war between these two nations and dealing with the loss and grief of T'Challa. Ross doesn't have shit to do with that. Allegra DeFontaine doesn't have shit to do with that, and neither does Riri Williams, Ironheart. And I hate to say that because I liked her. I liked the performance. I thought the character was great. I liked the friendship that is building between her and Shuri. But her introduction and subplot felt very shoehorned in to build up to Ironheart, her series that she's getting, and probably Armor Wars, which I'm guessing she'll be in as well. But you know what? I'm more interested in Ironheart now than I was before, so maybe they got the result they wanted.
Yeah, like I guess I'll watch it. Like, I always kind of was going to. But yeah, it is like all that stuff with her in the story was extra, and there were some good comedic moments. Like I think,
the chase scene was great.
Yeah, the chase scene was great, and I think that whole sequence they have on the bridge, I think that's one of the best like action sequences in the film. It's just it's very interesting. And it's kind of like we were saying earlier. It's like they're outmatched, and it's just 1 versus like 4 or whatever. It's kind of cool. to see that stuff. And Okoye and Ironheart, they do kind of feel like comedic relief characters in this movie to a certain degree. Of like, she slices the speaker in half and she's like, "I like this one." It's like, yes, that's a funny joke. I like that part. So, but there's a lot going on in this movie, and there's probably some things that they could have either cut down on, but then there's also a part of me that's like, I want more of some certain aspects, and I think the main thing that I do want more of was Talokan, the underwater civilization.
Okay.
And it's kind of what I was saying earlier. Like, what do you take out? What do you leave in? What do you want more of? And we got like a 10-minute scene of them exploring this underwater civilization, and they gave some backstory to Namor. But all those other his goons, the blue people. We didn't get any backstory for them,
right.
or to round out those characters at all. They were just kind of hench people in my mind, and so I have no idea who they are, what their stories are, or other things about the civilization that have just not been explored yet. And I think that there's just this part of me that wants to explore more of it. Like when I was growing up, Atlantis and The Road to El Dorado were some of my favorite kids movies, because they're just kind of fun to see that and showcase these civilizations and exploring them. And they do gloss over the idea of transferring diseases between these civilizations and totally fucking them up that way. But that's okay. They're kids movies.
They're kids cartoons. They don't need to do that.
Yes,
but
exactly. Yeah.
I think you're hitting on a really good point, which it's not that the Ironheart stuff or the CIA stuff is bad necessarily.
Yes.
It's just that you have to make prioritization decisions with your screen time when you're telling a big scoping story, and we don't get a lot of Talokan, but we do get a lot of Ironheart, and we do get a decent amount of CIA.
Yes, yeah.
But and some of the CIA stuff is necessary, but I do agree. I would have liked to get more time to see this culture and this new civilization that is being introduced to us, and I think we will. Because Namor's not going anywhere. He's going to be a character going forward. But it was really cool. And I did want to see more of it. Some of the underwater stuff didn't totally work for me. Like when he's giving his big speech to his army, it's something in the audio mixing or the way it sounds just doesn't. It feels disconnected. And I'm not sure what doesn't work about it, because in Aquaman, which is also in an underwater kingdom, it worked okay. I was fine with that. So I'm not sure what they did in that they didn't do here.
Yeah, it was kind of strange, for sure. I agree with you there. There's some small nitpicky things. If you really want to nitpick this movie to death, you can really focus in on the underwater physics and stuff like that. The sound projection. I know it's kind of different if you've probably been evolving underwater for centuries, that yes, you might grow enhanced ears and understand sound projection a little bit more, be able to do it a little bit better underwater. But I don't know. But yeah, some of these other underwater physics stuff were just didn't really make any sense, or just kind of looked strange. Willing to look the other way though, because this is a Marvel movie and it's completely impractical in general. But they swam super fast underwater, and it's okay. Sure. I guess I'll accept that for now. But there was also just the logistical part of my brain, pressure builds and builds and builds as you go underwater. And then as you go up to the surface too, that pressure is releasing a little bit.
The bends,
Yeah, the bends. So when you're rising up, you need to kind of rise slower than your bubbles are to counteract the balance and stuff like that. And it's no one was fucking taking that into any consideration when they were surfacing or whatever. It's I don't care. Looking the other way.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter at all.
I did think it was funny. There's a current that Namor and Shuri go in, and all I could think about was Finding Nemo when they ride the EAC.
We just see Crush there. He's just always in the tunnels. Just,
EAC, dude.
Oh, you're trying to get to that side of Talokan? All right, you want to catch this one. It'll take you really quick.
Dude, I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, no, good catch there. I like that.
Yeah.
I remember when I was reading some articles
Uh-huh.
on this, and they were talking about Talcon, there was just kind of some funny things that got pointed out to me that I wanted to mention. One was just kind of like a hypothetical question of like how many undiscovered and highly advanced nations exist on Earth in the MCU that are also led by minority populations. It's just like, oh yeah, that's kind of true.
I'm sure it's a lot, but less than the comics.
Yes, yeah. It was just kind of funny.
Yeah, but I did think it was pretty cool that like in the comics, it is not Talcon, it's Atlantis. And Namor is just some white dude. I think this was a great opportunity to introduce more representation, and changing Talcon to be Mesoamerican inspired was a really great choice. And
yeah,
funnily enough, Namor existed first in the comic books before Aquaman, but DC beat them to market in the film. So it's like, why not, instead of doing the same shit as DC, do a different thing and make this a new interpretation of the character. That is the wonderful thing of adaptation. You can do that.
Yes.
And if you're mourning the loss of a white Namor, I don't care. Who gives a shit, man? Not you in reality. Like, none of the people who complain about this actually care about this type of stuff. Like, people whining about a black Little Mermaid. It's like, you don't give a fuck about the Little Mermaid. Shut up.
You're
Doesn't matter.
You're just complaining about something else here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's absurd. Yeah, I read one review too that claimed because of Namor's character that it was they were saying like, oh, this is just like a sloppy attempt to expand the target market of the MCU and really hone in on the like Hispanics and as a demographic segment and draw them in as fans. And it's just like,
Jesus Christ,
like,
Jesus
dude,
fucking
like,
Christ. Expand the market of the MCU, the fucking Marvel movies, some of the highest. Like, are you fucking stupid?
Like, it's totally fine to have different types of representation on screen. Like, and I'm all for it, and I want more interesting characters like this too.
And it's like with changing comic book characters from white people to people of color, you have to remember a lot of these characters were initially written in like the 30s through the 60s. There was there's still a lot of racism, but there was even more back then. So everybody was fucking white.
Yeah, right.
Like, it's okay. We live in a different era now. We can have more representation. Jesus Christ, people are such losers. Anyone who complains about this is such a fucking basement dwelling little dweeb. Like,
yeah, like totally incel.
Yes, if you complain about this stuff, you are probably an incel.
Yeah, you can find something else to do with your time than complain about a superhero movie.
or maybe they can't, and that's why they do this.
Probably.
They complain like every fucking time. Like Captain Marvel, Black Panther, this. And it's like, Jesus, shut the fuck up. Just shut the fuck up. Nobody likes you. Nobody likes you.
Well, yeah.
But talking about appeasing audience demographics, so let's talk about Everett Ross, Martin Freeman's character.
Yeah, let's do that.
So, in the first Black Panther movie, even to a greater extent than this one, definitely forced into the movie to appeal to white audiences. I feel like he's like, I'm one of the good ones. I'm a CIA agent, but I'm not bad. His role here is a bit better, I would say, but he still does feel like a one of the good ones archetype, that it was like forced into the script by like market research saying like you need to have a good white guy because of our demographics. But yeah, and it's made even more gross in the first one by him being a CIA agent, and the CIA is probably most well known for its destabilization efforts in South America and Africa. Because, they want to have regimes friendly to the United States so they can get natural resources out of there nice and cheap to fuel the capitalist engine. But Wakanda Forever is more honest with its representation of the CIA and colonialist powers like America and Europe more generally. But actually, yesterday I watched FD Signifier's review of the movie Wakanda Forever, and he mentioned that Ross this time around actually does something to earn a level of allyship that he does not do in the first one. Like, he actually puts himself at risk within the CIA organization and the American government to help the Wakandans. Something that he does not do in the first movie. In the first movie, he just shoots Killmonger's ships because he's shoehorned into the ending of that movie. He's just a typical CIA guy, and then by happenstance, he's in Wakanda, and he helps. But in this one, he does actually like make a decision and go against the wishes of the CIA, and there are consequences for that. He gets freed by the Wakandans, but still.
Yeah.
So shout out to FD Signifier, great creator. He actually just put out hour and 20-minute video about like why the first Black Panther is so important to Black people. So
that would be cool to watch.
Yeah, it's a really good video that I think I learned a lot from. So
yeah, for real. Yeah, and I agree. Martin Freeman's character in this movie, Ross, he does kind of feel shoehorned in, and I'm glad, like just like what you were saying. Yeah, in the first one, he is just kind of there by happenstance, and then he's in this big kind of action or involved in the action sequence at the end. And in this one, he's not. He's not really involved in any action sequence except his rescue at the end, and that's very even like it feels like just like quick 2-minute scene at most, and I think that's very appropriate. This one feels more earned too.
Yeah.
Even though that we've talked about like how it is like a little bit unnecessary as a subplot, it does have a role in the film, and it feels a little bit more natural. And I think just like with his character in general, like Martin Freeman just kind of has like, I mean, he's a great actor. Don't get me wrong. I really like him. And there are certain roles where I'm like, oh yeah, he is definitely Bilbo, or yeah, he's definitely like this character and this, like, but he's just kind of like one of those one of those actors that just like, whenever I see him, I'm like, no, that's Martin Freeman. I don't care what the character's name is. That's Martin Freeman. Like, it just kind of pulls me out of the story a little bit.
That's me with Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, I can never.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that's not a character. That's DiCaprio on screen. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have no problem with the character of Everett Ross. Like, he's first introduced in Civil War, and he's like the new manager of like Avengers Town or whatever, but he doesn't really stay in that role. And the fact that he's like put in the Black Panther franchise specifically is so strange. Like, he gets his own character poster and everything. It's so funny.
It's kind of weird, but yeah, he's a fine character overall. But yeah, it's not always the perfect place for him, I suppose.
No, but he'll be in Thunderbolts, I imagine, which he'll probably fit more reasonably in there.
Yeah, they'll find something to do for him.
Yeah, it is interesting that apparently he and Allegra de Fontaine were like married or together at some point in the past, which is interesting.
That adds a layer to Thunderbolts as well, because I imagine that will resurface somehow. They'll find some way to like really flesh out Fontaine's character, and this just gives her a little bit more depth.
Yeah.
Too.
But on the character front, let's jump back to Namor for a little bit. He is a wonderful antagonist, and he is not the villain. That's a very important distinction to make. Because, like, for those who are not as versed in the nuances of that, a villain is like a bad person who does bad things. The antagonist is a entity who stands in opposition to the protagonist's goals. So, and those are not necessarily always bad people, right? It's just like they're in opposition. Good distinction there. And he does a lot of bad shit. Don't get me wrong. Like, he floods Wakanda and fucks it up and kills the queen by proxy. He doesn't murder her necessarily intentionally, but he floods her home and drowns her.
And I mean, the whole thing for him is, he's so anti-colonial, anti-imperialist. He's just like working towards or for the defense of his country and his civilization. And, that's why we made the distinction of antagonist versus villain. Like, his intentions and motivations are so clear that there's no way to confuse them as he's evil just because he's evil. No, he's doing these things and attacking Wakanda because he's protecting his civilization, and it just makes him for a more well-rounded character. He's more interesting that way, and you actually sympathize with his goals and what he's trying to achieve.
Yeah, and we'll come back to this specific point in a little bit when we talk about surprise cameo, but it is bad that he's trying to kill Riri Williams, but his motivation for doing so is such that she developed a weapon or a device that can identify my kingdom and hurt my people, and she has the capability to do it again. She didn't mean for that to be part of the U.S. government's forces, but, we're Americans. We know how that shit happens. But also, it's a really interesting point. It's like, T'Challa would not have hurt Riri Williams. His father would have killed her if the situation were Wakanda could be found out by this.
Yes.
So we do see the growth of Wakanda through the influence of T'Challa's nobility, but also the worldview of Killmonger informing them and allowing them to grow and recognize some of the errors of their ways. Because one of the first things that happens in Black Panther is T'Chaka kills his brother, Killmonger's dad.
Yeah.
So it's like Wakanda's longer exposure to the outside world has matured them more than Talokan's leadership has, because they have not had that interaction. And the only experience they really have with the outside world is them seeing the violence of colonial powers.
Yeah, conquistadors fucking shit up. Yeah.
Yep. And Huerta's performance was awesome. He's so good.
Exceptional, yeah. I'm very happy with him, and I want more of him. Yeah. I just want more. So I'm sure, because I think I heard like a rumor that they might be considering doing like a movie with him or something like that.
I'm sure they will.
They'll or maybe even a series. I don't know. I'll take either, because there's more to explore here. Exactly what we were talking with like Talokan. And even his character too. That give some more screen time to those background characters. Like develop some relations between him and like other people. Like just give us a little bit more down there for sure.
Yeah, and his motivation is to protect his people at the end of the day, and he rightly identifies at the end of the movie like this alliance we formed. Like it's because we will be attacked, and they will be attacked, and they will come to us. And I think he's reading the room correctly.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and let's briefly jump to M'Baku, who continues to be an awesome character.
Yes.
He's definitely mellowed out since we first met him in the first Black Panther, and he's more of a really solid advisor who is working to promote the well-being of Wakandans. He even opens up his region of the country as a refugee zone after the capital is flooded. And he's like the only one who correctly identifies the consequences of killing Namor and the war with Talokan that will ensue afterward. Because he's like, they see him as a god. We cannot kill this man.
He's very thoughtful in this film, and he's not as like, I mean, he does kind of like jump into action, like, and try and hit the Serpent King, I think that was a great scene too, just like demonstrating how powerful he actually was. He just like knocked him back in one strike. It's like he's very much like on par with like the strength of like Thor or like these other big guys. Namor specifically, that's who I'm talking about.
Oh, I thought you were talking about M'Baku. I'm like, I don't think that's true.
No, like well, like it's that scene where M'Baku tries to hit Namor, and then Namor just like breaks on his stick, just breaks on Namor's back, and then Namor hits him really strong. It's just like, oh shit, yeah, this guy really has put some power. So I appreciated that, but but M'Baku, like you were saying, he's a little bit more level-headed with that one exception there. But yeah, like when everyone's talking about war going to it, and other people like Shuri, they're like blinded by grief and this need for revenge to like and get like all these other things. M'Baku's the only one who's like sitting there and being like, do we really want to do this? Is this really the right move?
He's thinking farther ahead than the next immediate step, which I think everyone else in Shuri to the greatest extent because of what she's dealing with, and we're about to talk about that. But also everyone else just experienced their home being fucking obliterated, so they're in another layer of grief as well. And M'Baku, maybe partially because his home was more safe, but I don't actually think that's what we're supposed to get out of it. I think it's just he has assumed a very positive role in the culture of the country and is helping to shepherd them in the right direction. And I guess he's king now.
It seemed like that at the end, where he came out and he was like, "Yeah, she's sure he's not going to make it today. It's me."
I guess like it felt weird in the moment, like it almost felt like he was usurping. But no, the more I think about it, I don't think Shuri wants to be the queen. That didn't seem like something she had any desire for. So more power to him. Go M'Baku.
If that's what he wants to do, that I'm okay with it. I think he'll be a good king if that's the way the story is going to go from here. But yeah, why don't we talk about Shuri as the protagonist, because she had some big shoes to fill.
Yes.
After the loss of Chadwick Boseman and T'Challa, we are now focusing on Shuri instead of who was a side character and had agency in the original film, but she wasn't front and center. And
correct.
This one she is now, and I think she really filled out this role well. What do you think, Dom? How do you feel about her inheriting both the role of Black Panther and the role of protagonist here?
I think she fits into it pretty well. It is very clear that it was not the initial vision for this movie, but they adapted and did the best they could. I do think it was wise to choose her as the protagonist, though, because as she is the youngest, she's also the least mature character of the main cast, and that feeds into her inability to actually process her grief, and that gives fertile ground for a really good character arc, because she succumbs to her anger for the majority of this movie and makes a lot of really stupid decisions. But at the end, she's able to come back from that brink, and then she's able to complete that ritual with the funeral garb and the fire at the end, and cry. I think that's the first time she cries outwardly in the movie.
I think so.
So it's like her arc is being able to to confront that it's real and to accept that and deal with it, and she's finally able to do that at the end. So I think that works really well. And Letitia Wright does a great performance. Her alleged anti-vaxxer shit on set is some nonsense. That's really stupid, but I guess that got resolved. Maybe someone got through to her. I don't know. But if you haven't gotten vaccinated yet, go get vaccinated. Jesus Christ, get your boosters. Winter's going to be bad, so please get vaccinated. Protect yourself. But outside of that, I think she did a really good job and inherited the weight as well as anyone could, I think.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, because in the original film she's very immature. She's kind of rolling her eyes at the ceremony where it was like the Black Panther ceremony. She's like, let's just wrap this up, people. We already know how it's going to go. So while she does kind of respect the culture and everything about what's going on around her in the original film, she was kind of that original immature techie.
She's about moving it forward into a more technical.
The progressive little student, and this one, it does feel like there's a lot of weight on her shoulders to deliver and to rise up to the occasion, because her brother has died, and now it's like, well, there's no Black Panther, and your family is shrinking very rapidly. She lost her father, and then her brother, and then in this movie she also loses her mother.
I did not expect that either. I did not expect Queen Ramonda to die.
I didn't expect that either. I thought she was going to live through it the whole thing, so that was an interesting kind of layer to add in there. So she's got this kind of compounding loss from in these past few years, and I'm not even sure about the blip thing, who went where, if she got blipped or not.
I think she did. I think
so
she's
too.
on one of the screens or something. But
so I'm not even sure about that. But that's a lot of loss for her within just even though a lot of time has passed. This is for her a much shorter chunk of time because of the blip.
Right.
From my understanding there. So it's she's got a lot of grieving to do, and I think she gave a great performance throughout this film. I think just one note, if there's anything to harp on, and it's not even her fault as the actress or at all. I think it's just just because she's got like a little bit of a slimmer physique. When she put on the Black Panther costume, you compare that to Chadwick, it's a very different appearance for sure.
Yeah, she's tiny, but
exactly, yeah, and it's not a big deal at all.
No.
They made up for that with like the heart-shaped flower that she took to get like the superpowers and everything. So I thought that was good.
That's the benefit of your characters existing in a universe with superpowers. You can just ignore all the people who are like, this tiny person couldn't fight this bigger person. It's like, one, shut up. Two, she's superpowers, so shut up.
Shut up, yeah. And they got these like narrative devices around too of like, oh, they're like dehydrating Namor and all this other stuff to like make him weaker. So I thought that was a good workaround there.
Yeah, I liked her Black Panther suit as well.
Yes, I thought it was cool.
And I guess that heart-shaped herb does some pretty crazy heavy lifting because she gets skewered right through the gut and survives. So good for her. Congratulations. Yeah. But yeah, and we'll talk about the action in a little bit. But moving on, we get a surprise. Surprise. It was kind of leaked at one point, but cameo by Michael B. Jordan, Killmonger from the first movie, frequent collaborator of Ryan Coogler's. What'd you think of the cameo? How'd it go?
Well, I did not expect it myself. I didn't go into assuming that Jordan was going to show up, so it was a nice surprise for me. And I really liked it, too, because, Shuri, she goes to the kind of ancestral plane after taking it, and we're expecting her to see someone else. Either it's, like, going to be her mom or Chadwick or even, like, her father or something like that. And then we get someone who was the last Black Panther before T'Challa, technically, and it's
That's true.
It's just kind of interesting, and I'm glad that we didn't get some poor CGI attempt of like T'Challa's face. That would have been very, very much in poor taste. But I think the conversation that they have in the ancestral plane is an excellent ideological one to have, because her brother, T'Challa, was, or I guess their father, he was more resistant to open up Wakanda to the world. And that was kind of T'Challa's character growth in Black Panther, of him coming to terms with, we have failed so many people by being so isolationist. And he kind of comes around thanks to Michael B. Jordan a little bit. But, Michael B. Jordan had a very different view of like what to do with this technology. He wanted to give it to, the lower classes of society to rise up and rebel.
Yeah, I mean, he wanted to start a race war, right? Or am I misremembering the? Yeah,
I think that's basically it. Yeah, he wanted to help out Black people all across the world, and repress populations in general.
Yeah.
So I think, since he had that viewpoint, and Shuri's really kind of caught in this tricky situation of like, do we attack? What do we do here with Tyler Khan? And I really enjoyed that exchange. What did you think of it?
I thought it was great and very interesting for a couple of reasons. One, what he says to her is true and correct. Like, Wakanda is the way it is now because of him, because of his actions. And I think he even says like T'Chaka would have killed Riri Williams. Like, I think he says that explicitly. It's been a little while since we've seen the movie now, but and I also think it's not a gratuitous cameo. It's very appropriate for where Shuri's character is at this point in the story. And it also shows us a little bit more about who she is in contrast to her brother. She's not the same guy. Like, T'Challa would not have behaved the same way against Talo Khan as Shuri is. And that's good. It's interesting that we have a new protagonist who has a different outlook and behavior, but also it operates as a bit of a warning for what's to come, because she's in a dark place and she sees a character who kind of encourages her to pursue this course of action a little bit, and then she goes to war. So it gives us a sense of foreboding leading into the final conflict. It's like, we don't want this fight because we know both of these civilizations have valid feelings for why they're acting the way they are. And it's like, y'all can work it out. Come on, you can figure it out. But great cameo. Michael B. Jordan was great, as he is in the first movie. I love the visuals of that scene, too, where the fire like spreads out in different directions through the throne room.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Also interesting because Shuri doesn't really believe in the ancestral plane going into that, and that might also play into why she's so unable to grieve properly, because she can't accept that T'Challa is still with her in some capacity, like her mother is able to. And that plays into her character from the first movie, too, with the technology and pushing it forward. Great stuff. I would love to see conversations between her and M'Baku more in the next movie, too, because he is more about tradition and preserving old school Wakandan values and stuff like that, and she is more technology, change, and stuff like that. So I think some interesting philosophical back and forth between them would be fun. The two of them had a lot of great scenes together, but not about that specifically.
Absolutely.
But yeah, great cameo. And I want to touch on something I'm more mixed on a little bit too, and that's the character of Nakia. I like her a lot, and I like Lupita Nyong'o's performance, but I don't think either movie knows what to do with her. She feels like she's constantly floating more on the sidelines than she should be, because she's really cool, she's really proactive, and she's so interesting because she grew up having all the privileges and benefits of being in Wakanda and being a Wakandan, but instead of just resting on that, like a lot of the other Wakandan characters did initially, she has been out promoting or helping people more in need since we've been introduced to her. And that's so interesting, and they just do so little with her, and it's frustrating to me. I don't get it.
I agree with you there to a certain extent. Yeah, doesn't have a lot of agency in these films, and I mean, this one, she moved out of Wakanda to go help some other people. Can't remember, what was the country again? Do you remember?
She was in Haiti.
Haiti, right? Thank you. I couldn't remember that, and she is kind of in a way like Michael B. Jordan's character Killmonger, where she recognizes the inequities that exist. Like, Wakanda is a superpower nation that has this these advanced capabilities, and then there's all these other countries in the world that are not that. You know, they don't have the same access to those resources and that knowledge, and she's not, but she recognizes that the only way to make positive change is to, do it. It's not to just give people weapons. You have to go, like, actually, provide for them. So I think that she deserves some more agency in these films as well. Like, in this one, she's literally, like, doing that stuff, like helping people and teaching them, and then just like, okay, we're going to bring you back into the story because we have a special mission for you.
Right.
And it's like, okay, I guess that's fine, but I agree. I think she deserved a little bit more something to do.
I hope they find the right spot for her going forward. Even if she's not in any non-Black Panther movies either. Like, put her in something else too. Let her do some more shit. Another thing. Didn't love the bird suits. I think they look really stupid. I don't like them. I think they look really dumb. They're like Iron Man suits too. Right as they're introducing Ironheart, which is an Iron Man-esque character, it's like, and the like regular Dora Milaje uniforms, so fucking awesome. Come on, what is that? What is, like?
I feel like they could have done something better than just this mask thing. Like they could have, like, just maybe even just tweaked the arbor a little bit. Like, you don't need the headpiece. I don't think. I
didn't love it, but
whatever.
Let's talk about action a little bit. Mostly pretty good, I would say.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. Like I said, I liked the bridge scene, the chase sequence through the city. I thought that
was my favorite action scene in the movie. I think.
Yeah, I thought that was nice. And I just thought that was good, and there was some good comedic moments in there too with Okoye, and just like those other characters too. They were very funny.
When Okoye is in the car and she stabs her spear through the back of the car and then backs into the cop car, and the spear acts like a ramp that launches the car over her. It was so fucking sick.
Yeah, that was really cool. I was like, that's not how that would work, but okay.
None of this is how it would work. None of it.
Yeah, none of it makes sense, but it's fun. Yeah, I liked that sequence a lot, and I liked the the kind of the invasion of Wakanda. I thought that was neat as well. That was like a good sequence. I think the action between Shuri and Namor was good too.
Yes,
like I liked that part.
It was a nice brutal fight on the beach.
Yes,
and it was set up ahead of time about how they were going to depower him, and then basic screenwriting stuff, right? But they set up how they were going to depower him so she could beat him, and they did that, so it worked.
Yeah, I thought it worked out very well, but I think you and I are on a similar wavelength about the fight scene on the boat at the end. Like, they drive this big, massive boat out into the middle of the ocean, and there's some cool stuff in that, like when they're doing the flipping and stuff off the side.
Yeah, the Dora Milaje diving down the side. That's a great shot.
That's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like some of the action on top of the boat, it looks a little strange, I guess. Like kind of like, what's that, like the technology that they used on Thor to like film it, or
the volume, the Mandalorian thing.
Like, I think that kind of like, I don't know if they filmed that on the volume or anything like that.
Maybe.
But I feel like it kind of looked that way a little bit.
Okay.
So I just felt like some of that choreography on the boat looked a little goofy.
Yeah, it didn't look great, and I think the boat itself just looked super dumb. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
But also one thing that bothered me, and I guess they were trying to go out into the ocean to lure Namor onto this craft that would go back to land, but I'm like, these people are like supercharged in their power by water, and you're going out into the middle of the ocean to fight them.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing? What is the thought process here? I didn't. That whole section was very strange to me. I did not love it. Also, one little weird thing is on the bridge sequence, the bridge action scene, Okoye like cuts down a bunch of the Namor's warriors, and then their wounds heal. And then that doesn't really seem to happen in the final battle, or does it?
Yeah, it's they breeze past that.
But also, if you're Okoye and you've experienced this, and you agree to go out in the middle of the fucking ocean and fight these people, knowing that it's like you're all gonna die, all of you.
Oh yeah, like by the end, like when they come back with the ship, and like it's like only like maybe 10, 20 people left from Wakanda, and like all the other people are dead. But then it's just kind of like everyone just kneels, and it's like, Jesus Christ, all these people just died.
Yeah, and I've seen this discussed before, and it's a problem with this type of story. It's like, I've killed 100 of your henchmen, but I'm deciding I won't kill you. It's like Ezio in Assassin's Creed, right? Like, killing you won't bring my family back. I've killed 100 people, but it's like, I think it's a conceit that you kind of have to accept in this type of like enemies to making peace narrative. I mean, that's how peace is always made. Like hundreds of thousands of people and millions of people die in every single fucking war, and then the leadership has to make peace eventually.
Speaking of just speaking of war, do you want to talk about the colonialism aspect of this film and the CIA and all that good stuff?
Yeah, let's talk about colonialism, the French and the CIA.
Yes.
And the CIA, we mean America more broadly, because the U.S. and the French are the two nations very specifically called out. It presents a more honest picture of Western European and American political powers, I think, than Marvel usually does, than blockbuster cinema usually does, actually. But
yeah,
I love the UN is like scolding Queen Ramonda and Wakanda more generally for not sharing vibranium and technology like T'Challa promised at the end of the first movie, while at the same time conducting military raids on Wakandan outreach centers, trying to steal it, and then the Dora Milaje just like march all of these soldiers that they captured in. And it's like,
that was nice.
And it's funny because the soldiers are not specifically identified as being from any one nation. It's like, those fuckers are American. You know that. But and the Contessa basically having a fucking orgasm when she's like, oh, I dream about America having vibranium like the Wakandas have, like what we could do. It's like, yeah, we would do some horrible shit. More horrible shit than we normally do.
Oh, absolutely. It would drastically change like oppression in the world.
Yeah, the only country who's ever used nuclear weapons having another super-powered weapon, it's like, oh, I wonder what would happen. We even have a scene where the CIA agent guy explicitly mentions attacking Wakanda through destabilization. something that has been the CIA's MO since the beginning of the Cold War. Look it up.
It is, yes.
Yeah. And and the more, I think, accurately predicting that the surface dwellers will come for Wakanda, and then when that happens, Wakanda will reach out to Talakan to make use of their alliance. Because colonialists gonna colonize.
Yep, that's what they do.
Yeah, and it's like it's not like we've gotten better about this. We have just moved a little bit away from South America and Africa to the Middle East. It's like, why are we in the Middle East? Oh, oil. That's why. They have resources that America wants. That's why we're there.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate reality that we all kind of need to grapple with, is our own colonialist histories and how to avoid continuing to follow in those footsteps today. And kind of doing the same thing their ancestors did, and colonizing and pillaging and stealing from others. It's uncomfortable, but it's our history.
Imperialism is bad, and America is an empire. Like, make no mistake.
Yes.
We are an empire. We have military bases around the entire fucking planet, where I think we have like military boots on the ground in 60 plus countries right now, or something like that. Do you know what those countries are? Do you know why we're there? Probably not. I don't.
Can you name all of our territories?
Yeah, no. It's like, we have Puerto Rico, Guam. What the fuck?
We have these like islands like as our territories, and you know, but they're not considered states. They have no voting power. They're just kind of under our jurisdiction, even though we have no fucking claim to do so. It's just because we bought it or we conquered it at some point in the past.
And don't forget about the Native Americans too.
Yes, we've got a very troubling history, and we've talked at length about it on this podcast before. So.
And we will do so again, I'm sure. But
yes,
we're not going to end the conversation about Black Panther on that note. We're going to talk about the post-credit scene a little bit. So Shuri at the end of the movie goes to Haiti to stay with Nakia for a little bit and like get over her shit. And we're introduced to a child, T'Challa II, basically. I forget his Haitian name, but it is of some significance. I don't remember what it is though. So sorry about that.
I don't recall either. I don't recall.
Yeah, how did you feel about the reveal of little T'Challa?
I liked it a lot. It felt very sweet and endearing. You know, it's like we said, Shuri has experienced profound loss in these past few years. She's lost all of her family members in a very quick, short amount of time. And this post-credit scene, it introduces her to her only living family member now that she's like related to by blood. And it's, you know, it's touching in a way, because now she's got family again. So it's kind of nice. And it kind of touches on that cycle of life, you know, death and rebirth. And, you know, it is also kind of like what we were talking about earlier about recasting T'Challa. Like, there's no fucking way that should happen. But this, in our opinions, that shouldn't happen.
In our opinion,
like, in this way, by them introducing this character, albeit he is a very young boy, but, you know, give it 10 years, you have another T'Challa that you can reintroduce to the universe and kind of, you know, fill that role once more. So it's kind of a creative workaround in a way, and it gives some hope for the future, which I appreciate. But what did you think about it, Dylan?
Yeah, I mostly like it as well. I think it was very sweet. It is an overused trope of this male character dies, but he is survived by his son. We see it all the time, maybe a little bit too much, but I think it was a nice note to end on. And like you're saying, he could become a Black Panther in the future. Like, I would say right now, Marvel kind of has their, like, Gen 1 characters were up into Endgame, and Gen 2 characters are kind of like the younger people we're spotlighting right now, like Kate Bishop and Peter Parker and Riri Williams and all them. And like maybe Gen 3 characters, young T'Challa is grown up a little bit. Maybe Tony Stark's kid is grown up a little bit. Stuff like that. So if this franchise continues for the next 20 years, which if the way things are going, it might, that would be a nice nice way to do it. But
yeah,
I'm overall positive on it, and I'm overall positive on this movie. It is messy. It's all over the place, a little bit too ambitious for its own good, but I think the parts that focus on the themes of the movie really land. And there's good world building as well, you know.
Yes. Yeah, it's an interesting film and introduces some neat characters. Like you said, there's a little bit too much going on overall, but you know, it is excellent follow-up to the original Black Panther. Echoes a lot of those similar themes and echoes a very strong message, and just kind of keeps that consistency, which I really appreciate. So yeah, if you haven't seen it and you are a Marvel fan, why haven't you seen it yet? Go watch this movie.
Yeah. All right, and we're gonna transition away now, but future Marvel stuff we're talking about. Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special comes out this week. That should be fun.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Wow. Yay.
But yeah, as we just mentioned, let's talk about some other stuff we've been watching, reading, playing, blah blah blah. Niles, what media have you been consuming the last couple weeks?
So I've been keeping up with Andor. Just watched the most recent episode. So very, very much loving that series, and I'm excited to talk about it. I think that's going to be our next episode.
It is, yes.
Here on Play Pause Rewind. So if you like Star Wars, we hope you'll tune in next week, or
2 weeks
for next episode. Yeah, 2 weeks from now for our next episode on Andor. That's an excellent series. I've also been wrapping up my playing time with this Switch game called Fury, which is very fun. Like I think I'm on the final boss now, but
cool.
It's it's kind of a fun fighting game built on the Unity engine, so it's kind of neat. And it's an indie game.
Nice.
Those ones they're fun. And I'm continuing to read The Man in the High Castle, which I'm also enjoying. And actually a little bit kind of out of the ordinary for myself, I went to the opera.
Oh my!
The other day.
So bougie.
I know. I'm so cultured now. It was an interesting experience. It was the second opera I've been to, and I'm for my girlfriend. I got her some tickets for her birthday to go see the opera. So we're going to see multiple shows coming up. So we'll see 2 more this in 2023. This most recent time we saw Rigoletto, which was an Italian
Rigoletto.
Opera, and it was so much fun. It's got that song that's like ba da 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 da.
Oh.
Da, 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 da. You know, it's like, so I was like, oh, that's where that song comes from. I found out now finally. I know exactly where that song's from. So it was fun, and you know, like just going to the opera in general, it's nice getting dressed up, and you can see just like how different people will dress up too.
Is it just at the Performing Arts Center downtown?
Yeah,
okay.
It's at the Ellie Calkins Opera House
cool.
In Denver. So it was through the Colorado Opera that we saw it, and they got some good productions coming up too. But yeah, it's like, you know, you'll see some people that will go all out and wear these elaborate kind of costumes, you know, that have like, you know, it's like a ball gown, and then you'll see some people who will just come up in like a skinny jeans and like a hoodie, and it's like, awesome, go for it.
Yeah.
You know, the opera's for everyone. So yeah, looking forward to that. The next few shows.
Cool.
But Dylan, what about you? What have you been up to lately?
Well, I watched a lot of the midterms, but I'm not going to go too deep.
Yeah.
Also, I finished the Star Wars High Republic book I was reading. It was pretty good.
Nice.
But it's weird. I think maybe I talked about it in the last episode, maybe I didn't. But both of the books I've read from them, like, they center around like this big event, this big catastrophic thing that starts like a third to halfway through the book, and it's just like the fallout from these separate giant events, and it feels I don't know, I don't love that so much. It feels like the character development takes a little bit of a backseat to the event, like the plot event, but I'm enjoying them so far. Cool. But and I also, since I finished that book, I started another book, the second book in the second era of Mistborn, called Shadows of Self. Really enjoying that so far. I'm also keeping up with Andor. Great show, of course. And I went to go see The Banshees of Inisherin, which was really delightful and sad. Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson. If you haven't seen the trailer, it's like in the 1920s on an island off the coast of Ireland. And Brendan Gleeson's character one day is basically like, we're not friends anymore. I don't like you. That's it. And then Colin Farrell's character is like, why? What the fuck? And it's about that. And it's very funny, and it's really sad, too. Great movie. I'd recommend it. And I also watched last night All Quiet on the Western Front on Netflix. I read that book in middle school, and the movie is excellent. It's a really great anti-war movie. It's in German. It's fucking harrowing. It's about World War I, and it doesn't pull any punches. It's brutal. But
that's cool.
Yeah, it's really good. And have you read the book? Do you know what it's about at all?
I feel like I might have a long time ago, but I don't really remember. I've seen some promotions for this, or ads for this film, but I haven't watched it.
But I mean, what it's about is it's towards the end of World War I, and a bunch of young friends, German friends, like they're all excited and ready to go fight for their country, and they're like super hyped, and they go to war, and they get to the trenches, and the reality sets in about what it is, and it's just fucking brutal. And like it really just shows the horrors of war, and you can really see like why people at the time thought it would be the war to end all wars. Something like 17 million people died in World War I.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and the fronts only moved a few hundred meters throughout the whole war. Like, it was just horrifying.
Wow.
But it's a great movie. I would recommend it. And like we talked about with Squid Game, like it's subtitles in foreign languages. Sometimes that's hard for people, but like just do it, and then you sink into the routine of like read, look pretty quickly, and it works out just fine. But that is all for me. We will be back in 2 weeks' time for Andor, and then we'll figure out what to do for the episode after that, because I'll be in Texas for the holidays for a little while. So we'll have to figure that out. But until that time, please share with your friends, like and subscribe on YouTube, give us a 5-star review if you like the show. But we'd like this to keep growing and becoming more of a thing.
Yes.
So if you share it with anybody you think will like it, that would be really appreciated. Until next episode, though, Niles, where can people find you on the internet?
People can follow me on Instagram at NilesGotNoStyles. Dylan, what about you?
Well, for the foreseeable future, you can find me on Twitter at D-Day Movies. We'll see how much longer that platform lasts. But you can also find me on Instagram at DylanD1026, on YouTube at D-Day Movies, and on Twitch at D-Day_movies. Thank you all so much for watching and or listening. We will see you guys in 2 weeks. Have a happy Thanksgiving. See you later. Bye.
Gobble, gobble. Thanks.
Gobble, gobble.
Bye.